Hey Gen Mexers, Kat and I just returned to Oregon after 5 months down in Mexico, and so we've kind of like at the top of our mind is things that we miss about Mexico, things that we don't miss about Mexico. You could call them pros and cons or pluses and minuses, things like that. That's what I'm talking about in this video, is those things that maybe are different than living in the United States when you're living down in Mexico. So this is our house here in the US, and I'm gonna be just walking around the neighborhood because, you know, that's kind of one of the things I like to do up here in Oregon. But we'll talk about those pros and cons. Also, I'm gonna be talking about what you can expect for videos going forward, because we are up here in Oregon for about the next 6 months or so. And I'm gonna share some of those things that really surprised me that I miss about Mexico, because this is the third time that we've gone back and forth. So some things that surprised me and so maybe some things that will surprise you. I'm gonna start this walk and I'm gonna try to list like pros and cons or pluses and minuses. The first thing that we really noticed, this was even before we made it to the United States, but we were driving along, spent 2 days driving inside Mexico, and then we got to Mexicali, and people's driving behavior became really bad. Like people were cutting people off and honking and things like that. That kind of thing does not happen down in La Paz, Mexico. Maybe other parts of Mexico, maybe Mexico City, but for the most part, driving in La Paz is very muy tranquilo. Everyone is calm, driving slow, rolling through stop signs, but just really patient with one another. And that ended when we even got close to the border of the United States. Just kept going as we went north, especially through California. So one of the top things that I miss is the drivers down in Mexico. And as you can see here, I am wearing a sweatshirt here. I'm also wearing jeans and shoes. My feet aren't touching the ground. I mean, they're touching the shoes, but I'm not wearing flip-flops because the weather in Mexico, I'm missing the weather, I'm missing the sun. It's actually a slightly sunny day here in Oregon. I can actually see a little bit of blue sky up there, but it's kind of chilly and it's gonna get chillier throughout the next couple of days. So definitely missing the weather down in Mexico. So along with that is seeing something that we kind of miss when we're down there. It's something that is a positive about the United States, or specifically Portland, Oregon, is just look how green it is. It is really easy. Kat's been at her little urban farm a couple of times already. We just arrived 2 days ago. It's really easy to grow things here and not so much down in Mexico. So we're gonna put that in the pro column for the United States, is gardening. But now we're gonna continue on that theme and switch back to the other side, is allergies. Because it's so green here, the flowers are starting to bloom. The allergies, I'm already taking allergy medication and constantly blowing my nose and just being stuffed up. Down in Mexico, we don't have all this green, at least in La Paz. And like I said, I live in La Paz, or we live in La Paz during the winter. So there's other parts of Mexico that are much more green. Puerto Vallarta is one of them. I'm not sure how the allergies are there, but for us, allergies is a positive thing down in Mexico, or lack of allergies. So another big thing that was, that we quickly noticed was prices. We miss the prices in Mexico. Most things that we do are less expensive in Mexico. There's some things that are more expensive down in Mexico, but things like, especially, let's go this way, especially food, going out to eat. We just went to the grocery store here and spent over $300 to kind of stock up, and it was just painful how much the prices have gone up. We went out to breakfast with Kat's sister and her husband, and we noticed on the menu, the prices had been updated to be higher prices since the last time we were there. The other thing, that kind of the flip side of that, is the fact that the food is different. So I was able to get some biscuits and gravy, which is not something you can get down in Mexico. We'll also be eating a lot of Asian food, which Mexico City has good Asian food, but outside that, I'm not sure if other parts of the country have good Asian food or Indian food, things like that. So good to have that stuff, but we know we're going to be paying a lot. And so one of the things we don't do a lot when we're up in Portland is go out to eat, because it is so pricey, versus down in Mexico, it is so inexpensive to go to really nice restaurants. So we go out to eat, 4, 5, 6 times a week sometimes down there in Mexico. But here in the United States, it's maybe once or twice a week. So something to think about if you're considering a move to Mexico is how much more you'll be eating out at restaurants. We also don't have street tacos here. I mean, we've got food trucks, but they're even still kind of pricey. But those little stands that just kind of pop up every evening with tacos for $1, $1.50, something like that, I really miss those things. One thing that we don't miss is our foster dogs, because we brought our foster dogs with us. So this isn't really anything about pros and cons, but just something about our personal experience. We have 2 foster dogs here, and actually we've got those foster kittens. They're currently staying at a friend's house. They're not with us, but they are here in Portland, and we might be getting them back at some point. But one of them we think may have a home already. So something we don't find much in Mexico, I don't think I've seen them at all, is estate sales, but just garage sales in general. We went to a couple of estate sales today and picked up a few things. It's Sunday, so estate sales are half off. For those of you who are into that, that's something that you kind of miss when you're down in Mexico, because yeah, I've seen a couple of things that are labeled garage sales, but they're not really all that great, and I've never seen something like an estate sale. So if that's something you really enjoy, you might miss out on that, and it might be something you have to put on your agenda when you return to the US. Also, there are segundos, which are secondhand stores, and I'll have a video coming up about that, and I'll talk more about videos in a second. But Goodwill is something that is really popular here in Portland, and also just secondhand stores, consignment shops. It's kind of where we buy most of our clothing. It's better in the United States, I feel like, or at least here in Portland. It's a big secondhand shop culture. So that's something we kind of miss, because the segundos are just not the same. But continuing on buying stuff, Amazon delivery. Although you can get packages delivered via Amazon down in Mexico, one is you're going to be paying like an import fee usually, so things get more expensive. But like same day delivery or just a few hours or overnight delivery, that doesn't exist. Well, like I said, this is La Paz. Maybe some of this stuff exists in some place like Mexico City or Guadalajara or Monterrey, some of the bigger cities, but we ordered things that we were just outside Portland. We placed our Amazon order, and by Friday night, those things were on our porch. Same thing, we ordered some things yesterday. By this morning, things were on our porch. So we definitely get spoiled by the Amazon experience here in the United States. So it is something when we're down there that we do miss. Also, the Amazon driver never has any problem finding us. So down in Mexico, we don't have an address. We don't even have a street name. So we have to describe our house in the address we use on Amazon. And I always include the phone number or the WhatsApp number in there, because almost always the delivery driver gets lost and can't find it, and almost always they only speak Spanish. So I dread that. I see if I'm expecting a package, I see a call from Mexico or from the La Paz area coming through, and I'm like, oh boy, I'm gonna have to talk someone in to our house in Spanish. But I've gotten pretty good at kind of that Spanish that is solely about getting someone to our house. One of the things that I'm doing here is just having this walk and talk video. There's a lot of places in Mexico, kind of like similar neighborhoods, where this would not be possible because the sidewalks are not essentially gringo friendly, and I will have a video about that coming up. But there's holes, there's razor wire hanging down, but you have to be a much more active pedestrian when you're in Mexico. You can't just kind of like tune out, get on your phone, and pay absolutely no attention to where you're going, because you will get hurt. So that's one of the nice things here. Also, we have been walking our dogs a lot. This is really just a much more, this is Portland, so it's a very pedestrian friendly town. We know that, our dogs will be safe. There's not going to be street dogs running up to attack them, which is a problem in Mexico, is just the number of street dogs, especially those that aren't fixed. The dogs are getting a lot of walking. We're getting a lot more walking now that we're up in the US, but also we live in kind of a suburban area in Mexico. I've got a lot of friends who live in more of the urban core of La Paz, And this just might have that effect of, like, here in Portland, we're in a very walkable neighborhood. Down there, we're not a very walkable neighborhood. A lot of people who are watching this, you might live in the suburbs in the United States where you don't walk at all. You might move to an urban area down in La Paz and spend a lot more time, or down in Mexico and spend a lot more time walking when you're down there. And speaking of those street dogs, that is something we do not miss. There are street dogs all over Mexico, sometimes street cats, dogs that, are just neglected and in need of rescue. You just don't see that up in the United States the way you see it in Mexico. And it's very, it really tugs at your heartstrings. And we do our best to help out with that. And it is very rewarding to help save those dogs. But it's also a lot nicer just living in a place where you don't have to see dogs chained up, or you don't have to feel sad for the animals in the area. Almost right on cue, we have a little sidewalk kitty walking up. I just love how the cats here, the cats that are allowed out, are really social and just kind of come up on the sidewalk. That does exist in some areas, like Puerto Vallarta has a lot more social cat community, but cats don't really, there's not really street cats in La Paz, probably because there's so many street dogs. Okay, so I'm looking at my list here, and I noticed I forgot something when I was talking about gardening, and that is mowing the grass. And that is something that I do not miss when I'm down in Mexico. Got back and the grass was so tall in the yard, and kind of a lot of the maintenance stuff kind of cropped up, and it was like, okay, well, first thing to do when I got home on Friday night was to mow the grass. So that's something, maybe in some parts of Mexico there's enough rain and maybe people have lawns, but in La Paz that just isn't a thing. Also, speaking about those maintenance things, we've got Lucero and Augustine, and we've got kind of these guys who help us with so many maintenance type issues. And the beauty is it's relatively inexpensive, especially compared to the United States or here in Portland, what it would cost to hire someone to do a number of these things. A lot of stuff doesn't get done here in Portland because I have to do it. So we're just doing a little cleaning up of the house and kind of getting reoriented, and Kat pulled out the drawer pulls, and we bought these drawer pulls. God, it was, what was it? 15 years ago, to match the other drawer pulls, because we put in some new cabinets, and I just never installed the drawer pulls. And every year I think about it, and it's not going to take me that long to do it, but it is one of those things where down in Mexico, when we think of a little project like that, I just add it to Lucero's list, and he comes by probably once a week or once every couple weeks just to do little projects around our house. There was a little spot where the roof was leaking, the palm tree roof was leaking, and so I had him add some spacers in there. He repainted the fence. So a lot of those maintenance things that are on my plate here in Portland are not when down in Mexico. I'm just able to kind of direct someone to get it done for me. When I talked about driving earlier, I should have mentioned kind of on the plus side of being in the US is how safe it is to drive here. All the traffic lights work. Any intersection where there's supposed to be a stop sign, you better bet the stop sign will be there, and maybe a couple of stop signs to make sure you don't miss it. Guardrails and turns on the freeway, they're all very regulated, and down in Mexico, not so much. So there's really a sense in Mexico of take care of yourself, take care of your own, take care of your family, that the government isn't going to be there to make sure that you don't get hurt. If you trip on the sidewalk, you should have been looking. So if you're kind of one of those people that favors the litigious United States society where you're being coddled, Mexico might not be a good place for you, because you're completely responsible for everything, including not driving off the road and driving off a cliff. But sometimes it's pretty nice in the US when you have a little sign coming up to tell you exactly how fast to go around a curve, instead of having to guess and push on the brakes at the last minute because you've miscalculated. I'm leaving that in the plus column for the US. Another plus column for the United States. I mean, some of these things are just ridiculously simple, but Recycling and composting. I think most communities in the United States now have curbside recycling, at least. You know, our recycling here in Portland, our recycling gets picked up every week, once a week. Our compost and yard waste gets picked up once a week, and our garbage gets picked up every other week. So I'm guessing that's not common in terms of compost and how often garbage gets picked up. It totally works. You'd be surprised how well it works. Down in Mexico, you know, before we left that last week, I was like, oh, I got to scramble and get all the recycling done, and the glass has to go to one place, and the tin can metal has to go to another place, and then the aluminum and the paper goes to a third place. So I will have a video about recycling in La Paz coming up, by the way. But trust that most places in Mexico, they're just behind where the United States is in terms of some of those environmental things like recycling and composting. I feel like I've just gone through a bunch of the kind of negatives of Mexico, and let's go back to the positive column. We definitely miss the routine of Mexico. So some of our routine is just kind of like pickleball every Saturday morning, every Thursday morning. So we're hanging out with friends. Every morning we have coffee and tea out, you know, overlooking the Bay of La Paz, because our house is right there on the beach. So there's some of those routine things. I guess we'll probably redevelop some of our routines here, but I feel like the routines down there are maybe a little bit more fun. And let's go to adventure. So also, wow, look at these doors here. This is like $160 for one of these doors. I swear, I've got another video about being in Artesanos, having much, much nicer doors, being, boy, I can't remember the price, but there'll be a link up in one of the corners about that video. Where was I? Yeah, so we have some of those things that are routine, like pickleball and coffee and things like that. But there's also kind of the weekly adventures that happen. So a lot of times on Sundays, we'll just kind of like grab the dogs and go 20 minutes to a deserted beach, or go out on a boat with our friends. So there's so much nice little adventures. There's a lot of towns. We have visitors come to see us pretty often. So, you know, at least a few times during the winter, we'll have visitors, and then we'll take them places like Todos Santos or Triunfo, or to see the hot springs where the ocean meets the, it's like crashing on the beach, and there's hot springs water, and you can kind of like make a little spot for yourself to hang out. Those adventures, yeah, we could do some of those here in Portland. There's really cool places. There's even hot springs in Oregon. But for the most part, I feel like we do a lot more adventuring when we're down in Mexico. So I recently released a video about how quickly I got doctor's appointments down in Mexico and how slow it was up in the United States, but we've just kind of had a bunch of that experience when we're coming up here, and we're like, okay, well, we need to get that appointment and that appointment, and you know, Nugget's not feeling well again, so can we get her into the vet? It's just so convenient down in Mexico to be able to get to doctors, vets who speak English with like 24 hours notice, and then be able to afford that care, and then any medication and things like that that you might need also be affordable. So that gets back to that affordability of Mexico. It's not only affordable, but also super convenient when it comes to medical care. Okay, so we are getting close to that point where I'll tell you what's going to happen with videos this summer, but just a few more things, and this one was one of those that surprised me. And that was speaking Spanish. Maybe because my Spanish has gotten to the point where I'm more comfortable, and I'm excited about learning, and I'm excited about speaking and trying things. But up in the United States, people mostly speak English. We actually went to a Mexican restaurant right away when we got home, and it was kind of nice because I got to speak Spanish with the person taking my order. The entire order was like $30 for a couple of burritos, or they would call them super burros, down in La Paz, and a salad and like a horchata. That would easily have been maybe something like $10, maybe $12 down in Mexico. But it was nice to speak Spanish, and that's something, you know, it keeps my brain working. And I guess I hadn't realized how much I liked having the need to speak Spanish. Yeah, so that was a surprise to me. Now, something that might be a surprise to you, depending on how long you've been watching these videos, is safety. So Okay, so I had to take a break there. My arm is getting tired. I'd have to go see an osteopath or something, and that would just take forever. So, safety. I feel pretty safe here in Portland, but I feel incredibly safe down in Mexico. So the other day I mentioned we went to breakfast with Kat's sister, and then we were going to hop in her husband's car and head back to our place so they could meet one of the foster dogs. And I almost stepped into the wrong car. Like, started to open the door, and I was like, whoa, this car looks just like her husband's, but it wasn't. And that's the kind of thing that now gets you killed in the United States, is just making simple mistakes like that. That type of thing doesn't happen in Mexico. There's no mass shootings. Yes, there are cartels, but they're really focused on other cartels or other gangs. The general population, kind of the street criminal, they don't have guns. And there's not just kind of random people having a bad day packing a gun who might just decide now's the time to kill somebody. Like, road rage does not exist in Mexico. Actually, I've been trying to research this to find out if I could find anything about road rage down in Mexico. And there's like a Mexican actor in Florida who was in a road rage incident in the United States. And that's the only thing I can find. Certain things like that are kind of like the types of crimes or violent crimes that I'm likely to be the victim of, this just don't exist down in Mexico. Okay, so maybe this is going to reveal a little bit of my vainness and has nothing to do about your experience that you would have in Mexico. And that is, well, before I get to that, I want to make sure you subscribe. So click down below, click the bell icon, click all. And what I'm talking about here in my vanity is like having my happy hours, seeing people on the street who recognize me, who stop me and talk to me and talk about how they've moved to Mexico because of my videos. That's all a pretty big dopamine hit for me. So if you ever do see me on the street, even if you're up in Portland or wherever you are, be sure to stop and say hi, because, I love that. And that's something, I do see people here on the street that I know, because I've lived here for 17 years. But in Mexico, just like random interactions with people that I know or that know me because of the channel just happens so much more often. And I definitely like that. And in terms of how this might impact you is, besides maybe seeing me on the street, is that when you're in Mexico and kind of a expat heavy area, you're just likely to see your friends much more often at the same restaurants and things like that. It's something different than what we experience here in the United States. Okay, so I'm about to tell you about the videos, but one last thing which involves for me as a resident of Oregon half-time and Mexico half-time, pumping gas falls in neither column, because in both Oregon and in Mexico, there are attendants who pump your gas for you. So I really like that. It's just kind of nice. In Mexico, they usually clean your windshield, and you usually give them a tip of 10 or 20 pesos. Different here, you usually don't tip people here in Oregon, but you're not allowed to pump your own gas in either place. But that might be something different for you if you're in one of the other, I guess it's 48 states where you're allowed to pump your own gas once you reach Mexico. You'll have to sit back and chill while someone waits on you. Okay, so I've been circling around my neighborhood, and I'm kind of coming close to back to where I live. And let's talk about what I'll be doing this summer. I have got so many videos recorded for you guys. So if you're not subscribed, be sure to do that, because I've just been recording, and it's a little bit of editing to get videos out. I've got probably, I would guess, 50 or 60 videos that are recorded but not yet edited. So I've got interviews with other expats, because I know you guys love those. So I've been doing a lot of those interviews. I've got other kind of how-to videos, other experience videos of us being out and about in Mexico. I've got the video where I crashed my drone. That one will be coming up. So I will be doing a lot of editing. I'm also going to be doing some live videos where it's just me with some other expert who's not in the La Paz area. Figure when I'm up here, it's a good time to connect with people who are, somewhere else that I couldn't do an in-person interview with. But I'll be doing those probably Wednesdays live, so that you can participate in those. So expect to see those coming back, once, twice, 3 times a month. And be sure to be watching out for those new videos, because I have got so much stuff just waiting to be released. So I am excited to have that stuff out there for you. And on the screen now will be something that's probably, maybe you've already seen. Well, there'll be something that is perfect just for you. Hasta luego. Oh, one more thing. If you are down in Mexico or going back and forth, down in the comments, be sure to tell people what it is that you miss about either place. Hasta luego.